Okay, everybody, we might get underway, and yeah, welcome everybody. We've got quite a variety of people here, which is really good, because I think the topic is going to have some variety to it. My name's Steve Parkinson, for anybody who haven't met, any visitors, we'd like to see visitors come along, and I'm the cruising captain here. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Dave Kenny, our speaker here, who's talking on his experiences around the Melbourne to Osaka double-handed yacht race. I'm sure Dave is known to many of you here from his current yacht at the Edge. Dave is also a ship's captain and pilots gas tankers into northwest ports. So I'm guessing that safety is going to be quite a big part of his talk and his daily life indeed. However, Dave has done a lot in recreational and sporting competitive life on the water also. Started sailing as a young lad in dinghies and spent many years at lots of yacht clubs, particularly probably East Fremantle, as he still does, and I'm sure there are a number of East Fremantle people here and people that go to East Fremantle from other clubs like I do myself. I love the Weber Wednesday there. Dave has been competing in dinghies, and particularly lately, more recent years I guess, the Sabre dinghy, a single-handed dinghy, of which he has owned a number, I believe. Third now. Onto his third, so that's quite impressive. You know about that, Sharon? You know Dave has also spent over 20 years in keel boats, so he obviously spends much of his life on the water, but also as a fly-in, fly-out worker. We're very fortunate to have him here tonight, often away, so Dave is going to share some of his adventures in Two Up to Nippon. Thank you very much, Dave.
Just catch up with the IT, huh? It was all set till Steve started bumping things with his elbow, but that's okay. We'll get it back. Good evening. So yeah, this is about myself and Paul's adventure, basically a bit about the preparation, a bit about the race itself. Paul's Sydney based, so unfortunately can't be with us tonight, but you might hear his voice a couple of times as I'll play a few little videos if the IT supports us, and you can get some of his perspective on what we did. So without further ado, race to Osaka. Sorry, my age, you need notes. So first of all, you can see the lovely little mascot that we had. Thanks, Robbie. They made it all the way to Japan and all the way back again. They're a bit threadbare by the end of that, but the mascot's made it. So most people ask me, you know, where did you come in the race, or how long did you take, all that sort of thing, what type of boat did you have? But what they really want to know is what on earth possessed you to get on a small leaky boat for 6 weeks with another man and put yourself through this hardship. Unfortunately, there's no 8-second sound grab answer to that one, but hopefully at the end of this you'll have some idea of what motivated us and some of the trips and hazards and fixes that we had along the way. You probably have already seen this one, but in a nutshell, the race is 5,500 miles. Took us a day shy of 6 weeks. Fuel's an interesting one. That was one of the very many decisions that you had to make. How much fuel do I take? How much will I use? At 5,500 miles, it's the longest Cat 1 race that's run from Australia, the second longest being, of course, our Bali race, when we're allowed to go there, which is equivalent of 8 Sydney to Hobarts back to back, or as I like to think of it in WA terms, 26 Geraldton races. And I can assure you there was a fair bit of excitement on board when we entered our last Geraldton. We sailed a lot further than that, but that's yachting, eh? Race took just shy of 6 weeks, I've already mentioned, but really, the truth is it took all my energy and all my time and pretty much all my money for about 3 years. We started with 130 litres of diesel, but thanks to this wonderful little invention, the hydro generator, which is the little rudder blade thing with the impeller on it that you drop over the back, and if you're doing about 5 knots, it would power the entire boat, run the fridge, run the autopilot and put amps in the batteries. And that was a godsend. We used that 50 litres, which isn't bad for 6 weeks, and I would suggest that we probably could have done it on 35. We sort of upped the motor use to make water about halfway through when our skin started to break down and we were getting pretty horrible. Water, well, I was required to take 275 litres of water. I dumped 200 litres of that after crossing the start line because we had a water maker, and I guess the reality is in a small boat you've got to take some risk. You have to have a look at, you know, what's the options, and 200 kilos of weight was just too easy to get rid of. Fortunately it lasted the whole way. Highly recommend the Catadine system, they work brilliantly. So the idea of the race was initially to celebrate the 120th anniversary of the Port of Osaka on Honshu in Japan, if you know your way around that part of the world. First race, 87, as it says up there. Nowadays it's really just celebrates the sister city relationship between Melbourne and Osaka, but still that's the origins. For Paul and I, we first spoke about it in 1991, which was probably a pretty boozy night in Sydney when my ship was in port, and we got together and, you know, a lot of pub talk and how exciting that would be, but we were both pretty amped by that, and there you go, life got in the way. But only for about 25 years, so I just hope yet. I should mention the early races were really well funded, so the very first race actually built by Osaka Hokko Yacht Club. Nowadays it's just run on your entrance fee really and a little tiny bit of sponsorship that they can get. Next race is in 2023, so I reckon if you start tomorrow you've got time to get to the start of it. Righto. Decisions, eh? Seriously, probably about the hardest thing about this campaign was making all these decisions years in advance of what equipment to take, what sail setup to have, you know, what do I need, what's in, what's out. That was a pretty hard part of it.
I never got that.
No, Sharon missed out on it. Not really, I'm afraid.
I only got to try it.
But you did try it on, so that's probably close enough, eh?
I got
Sharon,
wear them for a minute.
disappointed.
Anyway, see? Wore them for a minute, that was it. I got a boat.
So if the IT works for me,
You know how that
we'll
works.
just get a real quick one in here. No, broken it, have we?
Going.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Did you guys hear that? Basically I said, I christened you the Edge and made Huey protect her and all his sailing do. And then, of course, don't waste the champagne. So river racing, we took the boat. You probably all know the Edge, or now the Edge, used to be the very first Kraken. Bought that off Todd in, 2016, I suppose. We took her into the river for a year, as my old ski instructor said, old terrain for new skills, and then we brought her after a year. We took her back out into the ocean. She desperately needed some blue water under the keel. So there we are in a new home at Fremantle Sailing Club. Took the mast out completely on both occasions that we went under the bridges. I just wasn't really keen to hinge it when I had plans for such a long trip. That was our pen on sea duty. So, similar to being at sea proper, crew is always a problem. Yeah? Getting the correctly skilled people with the right attitude, turn up regularly, is pretty much an enduring battle for most owners and masters. So, double-handed started to make a big comeback, or make a big come forward in this part of the world. It's a fantastic way to sail. Requires you to plan in great detail, to get on really well with someone else. It's very demanding. It's very demanding on the body at times, and highly rewarding, but definitely not for beginners. So the plan, in a nutshell. So I told people after buying the boat and keeping my own counsel, I let everybody know that I was keen to participate in this 8th edition of the Melbourne Osaka, or the Osaka Cup. So I had a cunning plan. Geraldton with a quick turnaround, building up to Bali in 2017, and then a large delivery, which was a real advantage in the end, followed by the main event. So lots of racing and training and sailing in and around this, of course, but that was the basic plan. And as it turned out, there's quite a few opportunities as well. Quick shot from work. The loading arms are still attached, so I'm not about to sail just yet, but that's what an LNG tanker looks like from the centre line of the bridge. So, in order to enact my plan, of course, I needed a trusty sidekick, or in double-handed speak, a co-skipper. My first choice was Paul Schultz, a very competent sailor from Sydney who I've known all my life and sailed with pretty much for 20 years or so, since we were children. Actually, it'd be longer than that now, wouldn't it? Anyway, he had a very young family and a business in crisis, so he said no, which was a bit of a blow to me. Just on that point, anyone who's thinking of doing long trips double-handed, the co-skipper is critical, probably fairly obviously, but a critical part of the decision. You know, you need personalities that fit, you need skill sets that are complementary and overlap in important areas, but mostly, and you need to communicate well. Fortunately, with a bit of encouragement from his mates and from his wife, thank goodness, Paul changed his mind, so we're both very glad he did. That was pretty much a watershed moment in life, I think. So Paul and I got a boat ready and put our hands up to do the Geraldton in 2016, which probably came as a bit of a surprise to some of the yacht racing stalwarts around here, for a couple of outsiders to jump in and want to do, you know, the longest race that we do annually as double-handers. And it was a hard race. We had strong surfing and following seas and surfing conditions. I think we topped out at 21 knots boat speed, so that's still the record on this race. So hopefully we earn a little bit of respect from the regulars. That's Paul just getting a bit of brekkie before we turn around and come back. So just a couple of notes. Even for this relatively short race, we beefed up the rigging. We added a heavy weather number 4 jib. Great expense, my wonderful satellite gear that's hanging off the back of the boat still. And then we also learned a few lessons. We learned a few lessons about tight time frames, especially when coming south on the West Australian coast, ETAs. We learned a bit about fatigue when we try and put the boat back in the pen after a couple of days of not really sleeping very well. And to be perfectly honest, I think this entire campaign was really about fatigue management and the basically the way that human performance deteriorates when you're extremely tired. Nice beers, Marty. So the three amigos who did much of the unpaid work for the barley refit, and the edge getting a bit of a water blast in the shed there. So what did we do before barley? So we've got a big race coming up next year with Exmouth. This is what we did to this boat before barley. So we inspected and maintained the mast, we sleeved the boom at the Vang takeoff, we beefed up at the gooseneck quite considerably. Replaced all the standing rigging, added a HF backstay, or to the backstay I should say. Removed and replaced the rudders, and that was a heck of a job, that one. We overhauled the engine and all the mechanical systems, thanks to Chief Engineer Singleton, one of my guys from work, who did a lot of work on the boat on this coast, and I have had another colleague who did a lot of engineering work on the boat on the other side of the country. So we removed the table, the internal doors, a couple of bunks, everything else that wasn't bolted down, including the toilet seat. That actually, half of that toilet seat made it back on when it was pointed out to me that I wasn't actually in prison at the moment. So we also did the batteries, replaced the start battery and put the wonderful LiPo 4s on, the lithium batteries. Fantastic choice. This gave me twice the battery storage for half the weight. And as you know, it's all about weight, huh? Added a reverse osmosis water maker, we've already spoken about, second water tank, additional high capacity automatic bilge water pump, which incidentally stopped the boat from sinking a few weeks ago when we got cut in half at the front here. On deck, winches were overhauled, additional control lines and cleats using those constrictors, the wonderful long things that don't stress your ropes as much. And everything was basically checked and replaced as necessary. So that was for the barley race. Opportunities. Seem to get a few of these, hey? So it's funny how life works. I'm at home, I get a call from the shipwright who's doing the install of the water maker, and he asked me to come down to the boat. I get down there and the poor young chap who's putting the water maker in and doing all these wonderful plumbing runs through the underside of the boat has to tell me he's just drilled a 3mm hole through the bottom of the boat. So I'm pretty thrilled about this one, huh? But there was a lot worse to come. The next day, when they started to repair the 3mm hole, they started grinding out and they realised that there was unwetted fiberglass, if that's the correct term. But basically the resin hadn't got into a whole bunch of the material there. So you can see that here. So obviously, anyone who knows anything about building boats, this can only happen at the manufacturing stage. So they've mucked up. You know, they haven't got the vacuum system right, and they've missed a whole bunch of structure. So this means that essentially it's probably through half the depth of the glass. So this means that the keel and the hull attachment are seriously weaker than they were designed to be, essentially. Out of concern for other sailors' safety, I did approach Juno, they're guys up in Hong Kong, I think. But anyway, I approached them, explained the situation, and let's just say they thought I'd put the wrong paint on or something. So, as I say, denial is not a river in Egypt. So it led us to another opportunity, which was to repair the keel. We glassed about an area about 1.2 metres by 0.7 of a metre to a depth about half the thickness, as I already said. While we're at it, we seriously beefed up the inside, the washer and the plate arrangement. So it made it really strong. In essence, the boat that started the barley race was in better condition than a brand new one. And it's funny, it's a fortunate twist of fate, because I was falling off waves in the Coral Sea in a cyclone, and I was very thankful that we'd found this problem at the time, before we really needed it. So, Bali, or not. Little photo of my son there helping to build some sails. So we had a very rushed preparation for Bali. I had 64 shares in an Australian ship registered in my name for the first time, which was wonderful. And Paul and I lined up for the Bali start. Beautiful autumn day. I know Rob and Phil will remember it. It was gorgeous. We had a fantastic forecast. We thought it was going to take us about 10 days, mostly running conditions. Unfortunately, on the second night out, my brand new lithiums died and blacked out the ship. So we had this horrible decision we had to make. We either had to run the engine every time we wanted to use the autopilot, keep the fridge cold, do any navigation or electronic navigation, you know, or we could focus on the big picture and turn back, which is what we ended up doing. So we turned back, rushed through some beefing up, redid the cable runs, up the alternator, fixed a few other things, and there was a bit of human error involved in this one on my part. But at the end of the day, we got the work done, and we went for a sail to Cape Naturalist in a full gale, which was probably much better training for the Osaka than just a nice, comfortable trip up to Bali. So, again, strangely enough, it was fortuitous. We learned a lot about power generation on the boat. We got a good hard sailing, which was great for us, and we did manage to fly up to Bali and party with the guys who'd made it and girls who'd made it, and also my delivery crew as well. That's just a nice day. Did I say more opportunities? So a port versus starboard in a 40-mile race, had me back out of the water and wondering what the hell I was doing, put myself through all this. I have added a comment, at least this bloke almost missed. He only hit the quarter, but took out the quarter of the boat and the framework and the satellite dish and stuff like that. But anyway, all these repairs and time out of the water meant I was starting to affect my preparation for the main event. So that's the What and See that I mentioned earlier. That's on Kraken the 3600, but we put the same one out on the little boat. So that What and See, fantastic thing. I've already mentioned how it puts a whole bunch of amps in, boat speed of about 5 knots, and it'll power the ship. Took a direct hit from a small log up near the equator and hung in there. Did a really good job. I honestly can't talk highly enough of these things. We called ours Hydro Joe for obvious reasons. So we're on this topic of power. I also took a spare impeller for Hydro Joe and a soft, or a semi-rigid actually, solar panel, just to get us through. Really, I think preparation, and you'll make your own decisions when you get organised for things like this, but it's redundancy on redundancy. Some things that you just can't live without, and in modern racing boats, power is one of them. So we also ran our engine for about an hour a day, just before the evening sked. Make sure the batteries are nicely topped up, make the water, and that sort of thing. Much better than a pearl necklace.
I beg to differ.
We got a new mainsail, a new staysail, and another spinnaker. So. Destination Melbourne. Skip through this one, but basically that's all the stuff we took. Mate of mine, Carl and Paul Schultz, who came with us to Albany to help train Carl up, and then the three of us, Carl, Marty, and I, took off to Esperance. Bit of a wet, bumpy ride going across to Albany. What do you say, Marty?
He's still trying to forget it.
No, he's not. So 15 days of sailing from here to Melbourne, spread over about 3 weeks because we had a bit of a slow start, and then we stopped for a night or two in Albany, and then we snuck into Esperance between frontal systems, and then we hung out there for about 5 days, I think, before those horrible 50 knotters played through, and then we took off to Melbourne. So a few photos there. That's West Cape Howe, us leaving Albany, Carl's birthday at sea, Marty about to go climbing in Esperance, my manky finger, and arriving in Esperance. For those who think it's cold round about now, when you see temperatures 14 degrees, it's freezing on board. Fiberglass not being a great insulator. So we were rugged up all the time, the beanies and gloves most of the time. That's the entrance leads to Melbourne. Quite confusing. Marks several different channels and where to go and where not to go. Well worth studying before you get there, for sure. We sailed through the Rip, which was great. Had the engine ticking over but not in gear. And that was the new home at Royal Brighton. Did I say that right, Mark? Royal Brighton. Okay. So that's Big Jim, my chief engineer. Great fella, did a heap of work over in Melbourne for us just to make sure that we're ready to go. Lucky number 7. So I think we're the 8th boat to enter the race. The first boat to enter the race pulled out about 2 days before the race started, which was a shame. They spent a fortune on the boat, but just couldn't pull it together. That was an incline test I had to do right at the last minute, and just checking keel bites and things. So I really can't overstate how much help I needed and received without asking for it, to be honest, and often from unexpected quarters. You know, a boat builder who's walking past the boat and makes a comment, and before you know it, he's helping you out and doing all sorts of things for you. I truly don't think I would have made it to the start line without such support. Had a fantastic mob at Sandringham who runs the race. And this was a pretty sad time for this yacht club because this was March 2018, and of course the Bunbury race and Finisterre's demise happened at that time. So I was in the middle of this, them throwing last minute inclines, healing inclines on me, making me redo the survival at sea course. This is all because of Finisterre. Because I sort of snuck through with a qualification as a mariner rather than have done the SSC, whatever it is. But anyway, it did bring, certainly Finisterre's accident did bring the whole voyage into stark relief for me. Made me realise there is inherent danger in what you're doing, and you better be pretty careful. It was a pretty stressful time over in Melbourne, and I ducked home for the weekend. I did make it to the memorial, came straight from the airport, but I sort of needed that circuit breaker, and I sort of hoped that Fremantle Sailing Club might have needed something a bit more positive to think about as well. Anyway, while the paint dried, I came home, went back again to load up and get going. More for the navigators, but bit of nav old and new. I did take a full suite of paper charts and publications. I took a trusty sextant, which had that been required to be used, it would have involved a fair bit of head scratching and digging in the deepest, darkest memories, I'm sure. Well, most of you will be familiar with Expedition, or some of you will be familiar with Expedition, a fantastic navigation program that we use for yacht racing specifically. I also had the old Ray Marine chart plotter, which helped out a lot. And most importantly, a gift from a friend, Marty, his hip flask with a map of the world on it, so that's like your last line of defence. I never go anywhere without it now. So one of the unusual parts of this race was it had a staggered start. So over about a 2.5 week period, they started boats at different times. Now the intent of this was, there was two really. The main one was to make sure that there was a bit of mutual support when we're in the really remote sections of the race. So when we're in the North Pacific, there's not a lot around really, and your rescue would be other competitors most likely. So that was the main reason. The other one was a little bit was about keeping people on station for too long at the finish line. Quite a contentious issue at the end of the race, but not as contentious as the cyclone avoidance process that they put in. Okay. Let's see if this holds true. Can I hear from Paul now? I think.
Welcome to Dave and Paul's epic journey aboard the Edge, the 2018 edition of the Melbourne to Osaka double-header yacht race. It's a long, tough race with many challenges and the most awesome Japanese welcome that can be imagined. Our story begins with the last day of a long delivery from Perth to Melbourne for the Edge, where after a few months of final preparations at Royal Brighton Yacht Club, Dave and Paul are doing the final motor down to Blackgowrie Yacht Club for our start and our final night on Australian soil for some time. Here we are, mate. Come a long way. We're downstairs now with about an hour and a half to go, getting about 30 knots outside. Welcome to the Melbourne Osaka. So, how you going?
Nervous.
Yeah.
A few butterflies in the stomach,
Yeah.
but keen to get started, to be honest. It's been a long journey just to get to this point.
Yeah.
A lot of people helped us. A lot of people, both on the east and the west coast, you know, engineers from work, boat builders, riggers, all their family and friends gave heaps of support. We honestly wouldn't be here without it. And to be honest, Paul, it's pretty much everything we've got has gone into this race. Financially, time, energy, you know, for us, it's taken a lot to get here, but we're here now, so let's enjoy it.
Absolutely, mate. All the best.
All the best, be safe,
Yeah.
hook on,
Absolutely.
all the time.
Rock and roll.
That's our promise to you, we're hooked on.
Yeah, so critically important, that thing. Let's do the other one, sorry. There you go. So over halfway. All the people who have competed in this race before, they talk about halfway point being the start line, and indeed, out of the 36 boats that signed up, and it was not an insignificant fee to sign up for the race, only 19 made it to the start line, only 16 to the finish line. That's much better than they used to have in the old days, where they'd lose a third of the fleet. But they do a lot of work now, the team that put the race together. They do medical briefings, they talk about food, they talk about equipment, and we had all these seminars and what we're all used to now, Zoom meetings, to get people up to speed with what it's going to take. So we're at the halfway mark. The day started overcast, 25 knots, solid 25 knots, forecast to increase. It was a flood tide at the rip, so we're punching out into a flood tide, which is never much fun through that part of the world. We started with a double reef main and a number 3. Had a great number 3 that I could reef to a number 4. That was a real go-to sail for us. But we're also at that point, we're excited, but you're also at that point, you've been an administrator for about a year and a half, and now you're actually going to become a sailor and do the stuff that you really want to do, what you're prepared for and what you're good at. So anything you've forgotten, you know, you now have to live without. What you haven't done hasn't been done. Paul forgot his nail clippers and toothpaste, and I forgot razors. So you'll know how far the race has progressed by how my beard grows. On another point here, we're one of the few boats that ran with hanked-on headsails. Requires a lot more trips to the foredeck, which is always a risk, always an exposure. But the sail cloth is the right weight and the shape is right, so that was our choice. So we worked pretty hard by having to get up and down to the foredeck a lot and then fold sails in the cockpit and things like that. If you look carefully here, you can see me fussing with my finger. Just before the start, I broke my ring finger on my right hand, so that was good fun. And I couldn't buddy strap it and put it in a glove, which going into Bass Strait, you need to be in gloves in 25 knots. So I taped the glove together and just sort of shoved my hand in there with my teeth gritted. And away we went. I'd also thrown my phone over the side on the trip down to Blackgowrie, which meant that I had Sharon's playlist of 1980s dinner music for 6 weeks, which was pretty tough.
That was the worst part.
So this slide tells the story of the first night in Bass Strait. There's a bit of a hex on this race. There's a lot of stuff happens on that very first day that goes wrong. People lose sails over the side, people injure themselves, boats break coming out of the rip. One of the guys in this race broke his bow thruster off. He had one of those collapsible or foldable bow thrusters, and that came right off and sunk that, or flooded that whole compartment that it's connected to. I had a voice in my head saying, you know, be conservative, you know, like take it easy, it's the first night, blah, 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 it's a long race. And it was 25 knots, so we were right at the top end of our A2, probably above it. So that's our biggest running kite, for those who don't know that. So we went for the A4, got it out the bag, hooked it up, and we'd fixed a rigging problem last time we'd used it, and then hadn't tested it again. That's our fault, preparation. And so that was no good, took a bit. We got it going later, but took a bit. So we went, Paul said, it's just above, isn't it? I said, oh yeah, right, it's just above. So we went for the A2 and it lasted about 10 minutes. We were between frontal systems, so unstable air mass, and you're always going to expect that 40%, plus 40% that the Bureau keeps banging on about. You don't get that in stable conditions. Quick shot of Wilson's Promontory, and a borrowed shot of an albatross, because you can't shoot them from a ship. Oh, terrible. Impossible. They move way too fast. Faraday. EAC. So I downloaded a lot of current graphs and imagery before we got going. And I also had a professional forecaster give me a forecast before the start. So this explains a bit here. So coming around Wilson's Prom about here, you either go Gobo Island, which is straight there into the teeth of that lot, and up if you're on the run line. What I did was I came way wide, picked up this stuff, and then went up to that next lot. Paul was quite upset because he was, you know, once we saw Wilson's Prom, that was it. We were hundreds of miles off the coast for the rest of the race, but we got a good push from the current. We started to settle into our routine. We ran a naval watch system, 4 hours basis with the split of the evening watches, which are the dog watches. So that put a rotation into it, and it seemed to work quite well. It meant that the watch change happened at meal times primarily. Meant that so that meant you're both going to be up anyway. Meant that one person got a good night's sleep and did the middle watch, and the other person didn't get much sleep, but they got to sleep right through the middle. Most days, about 1700, we'd have a rum, and well, before we had a rum, we'd make our selection for the night, tuck the boat up tight. It's a long race, so you're not pushing it through the dark hours. And then, you know, we'd cook, eat, clean up, and someone was in bed fast asleep by 20:30 probably. The big issue was keeping the boat and the people dry, and especially the electronics, which became almost a nightmare. So Cyclone Iris, a friend of mine, I'll never forget that name. So that was a big hurdle. The Fijians named it, took the name off it, we sailed through it, then the Australian Bureau renamed it, and we got monstered by it. So we were sailing probably the highest winds we had in the whole race, 45 knots. That was on the nose, of course. Very steep seas, as you get with these things. But it also dominated the weather for probably 10 days, and it established a south-flowing current through the Solomon Sea, which is nasty because it's again now, and a light northerly wind as well. So that hurts pretty bad. I like to show this one, because you can dream, hey? For those who can't see it, it says that at 2,000 miles into the race, we're first on everything. If only. So 2 things happened that changed that result. We missed a weather window in the Solomon Sea by about 7 hours, and I reckon my guesstimate is that cost us about 5 days. And the other thing that happened, the Melbourne to Osaka race is a non-stop unassisted event. But most of the fleet pulled into Southport near Brisbane to avoid the cyclone, and they actually had their time stopped while they pulled in. In previous races, the refuge for weather reasons had been treated like anchoring. If you're a yacht racer, it's been treated like anchoring, so there's no penalty, but there's no advantage given. In this case, instead of pounding into 40 knots of breeze, breaking boats and people, They pulled in, refreshed, redid their stores, rested, checked their gear, downloaded weather maps. That's a bit I was most sad about, and then came out into a quartering 20 knots of breeze. So no, I'm not bitter about that one at all. Right, I've got a few short videos for you, if you bear with me, to give you a bit of an idea of what it looks like. And Paul gets his voice in here, of course, as well. Seems he's stuck in Sydney.
Iris now behind us, we edge our way into the Solomon Sea. We hold a nice little gap over Bartholomew. However, the super little morning star keeps taunting us, and we really struggle to catch up. The next few weeks are frustrating to say the least. However, generally, we stay in pretty good spirits.
Hello, day 18, 19 of our little journey to Osaka. We're just still in the sea. We've been there for 5 days now, and we love it. And it's 5 o'clock. Well, it's almost 5 o'clock. We sort of sneaked one early today. So a little run and a bit of food to have, because you've got to do it when you're out at sea, don't you? Yeah, so look, it's been a bit of a few tough days on the Solomon Sea. Headwinds all the way, basically, and no breeze. So it's been a bit of tricky too. Lots of thunderstorms at night, so they're always a bit of fun to look out for. We're going to get a few more tonight, and hopefully we'll be out here into the Bismarck Sea tomorrow late, hopefully. Then sort of turn the corner and go to head to the Osaka, which is quite exciting. Okay, a little action shot for you here. It's all go. I'm going to hold the cheese plate while Dave takes the boat. He's doing it double-handed style. Go for it, mate.
Ready about.
Ready about.
Double down.
He's a machine. Let him go. Good, the biscuits are safe, and the run's okay. So nice catch. That's about 9.5 out of 10, that one. What up, mate?
Yeah, welcome to day 20 of the Melbourne Osaka on the edge. Still just drifting along the Solomon Sea at the moment. Hopefully we don't have a bit today, because we'll get over it. But we're getting there. This race throws up a lot of challenges at times. We've had a few over the last couple of weeks, but today's probably been our biggest issue so far. We could have gone through it in our race, we reckon. Unfortunately, our freezer's gone down with all our food in it. Dave's just working on the electrics now, trying to get it sorted. How you going there, buddy?
Well, dodgy days of electrical repairs. It's trying to fix dodgy Carl's plug maintenance system, I think. But the main thing is, we have got beers on ice.
That's good. So they'll be okay?
Well,
we're going to pull through?
I think they'll manage. We might run out though.
No, don't hear that. If it runs out, I'm off.
See, he didn't get off though, unfortunately.
But he didn't order enough.
He had one job, buy the beer. Somehow, 1 beer a day for 2 people for 40 days, roughly, was equated to a carton of beer. But anyway, I'll try another one.
A few days into this race now, 24, I've lost count, 24, 25 days, and today marks a very special occasion because it's the first time in about 3 weeks we have, what do we have, Dave?
We have a spinnaker up.
No.
We do.
No.
The wind is no longer on the nose.
No!
How unusual.
This is the Traben sailing race, and the first time we've had the spinnaker up in 3 weeks. Look at that. Look at that baby. Look at it go. We're flying. We're doing 3.5 knots. Heading towards the equator. And long may this stay up. Okay, so the kite up 10 minutes, and not quite coming. This will be a nice little test. We'll check back in half an hour's time and see how it's gone. Ready, boys, here comes our first jump. It's just about here. And here we go. Yeah. No, I'm taking the camera.
We've been in about 3 weeks, I reckon. And going the right way too. Hey,
Just cracked egg.
8 knots.
I really wasn't running. It was all off.
Okay. Very fish out. Very fish.
So a bit of a taste of some sailing action there. I'll give you one more. Take a shot.
Paul's on deck, decided we want to be on the other board. There he goes, bit of a wave. And so he's going to go for a tack. This is called a solo tack. And you can see we've just put some sails up. And, you know, it's a bit of a spaghetti factory out there. But we'll see how he handles it, eh? Bit of carnage here. Preparation. So we'd have to say that's one of the more challenging ones. Take a second bite at it. Left forgot to prep something. It was just the boom preventer, but that'll stop you going through. And obviously it's quite windy and pouring with rain, and you know we sailed most of the night, so we're a bit tired as well. Here we are, same spot. I'm hiding inside. Paul's out on deck, still in the same rain shower. Just done his tack. Now he's decided to have a bit of a tubs. So shampoo through the hair that's about to run into his eyes. Missing with rain. That'll keep him alive. All good. And a water bottle springs down. It's amazing, the ingenuity. Probably doesn't have enough now, but that's okay. He'll get there.
You've got to keep it lighter. So the tropics, they're hot, damn hot, without a doubt. So we're getting there. Food was a really major part of our preparation, something we did really well. I think the long delivery trip we did made a big difference to how the food we took and how we did it. We went for the weight hit of an Engels freezer and took home cooked meals that were nourishing and flavoursome. And that was fantastic, made a huge difference. Kept your spirits up, but also kept your strength up and your focus up as well. So I think some of the guys that had gone out, ducked around for a couple of days in Bass Strait and come back in from Melbourne, never had that experience of doing several weeks in a row. I think that they've got some of that wrong. Paul and I did pretty well. We lost about 8 kilos each. You notice a slowly shrinking man and the growing beard. But some of the others who went all hardcore on the freeze dry, they were losing 15 and 20 kilos, and these are from frames that are slim people, so we're not talking losing weight, it's just fat, we're talking actually losing their body mass, their muscle. What else we got? Chores. Paul had another bath, he did a bit of that. Some trash, a lot of plastic in this world. John Sanders is out checking it out now, but that's heading for the Pacific Gyre in the South Pacific. So heading east, unfortunately. More opportunities. So about 600 miles out, we had, I noticed some damage to our rigging. So our D1 started to birdcage and broke strands, which meant that we had to back it up, obviously, with rope, take the foot off the pedal, and we still had a long way to go. 600 miles out from Japan, there's not much out there. Involved about 30 climbs up the mast as well. Every time we reefed, every time we pulled it down, put the rustler up, I had to go up the mast. Paul doesn't like heights, so it was always this is the first time I did it. I used the bosun's chair, but after that I just used my climbing harness, much safer. Yeah, I don't even know why we have the bosun's chair on board. Maybe throw it aside. Okay. So the notorious Kuroshio current. So that's it, you can see there. The colour gives some indication of the strength of flow. Osaka right up in the point of the bay here. And this horrible current here runs at about 6 knots at its peak, which is was a heck of a lot. The day it was about 60 nautical miles wide. The day we went through it, there was 35 knots of wind against that current, and it threw up the worst seas we saw on the whole trip, 60 miles out of Japan. Oh, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, it was horrendous. Just the waves, you just couldn't steer around. You could steer around 2 or 3 and then just fell off one, easily as high as this seal, more. I was very worried about the mast at that point. I thought she was definitely coming down. The seas during the cyclone were bigger, but not as steep and not as confused. Okay. So, we're almost there now. This is a beautiful day sailing up Key Swedo, which is like the outer bay, before you get to Uraseto, which is a very narrow entrance that takes you into Osaka Bay proper. Okay, I've got a bit of a longer vid here, but I think it's going to be worth it, so if you're not falling asleep yet, we're almost there.
Hey folks, okay, so we've all heard about the Edge Steakhouse. Well, I'm about to go and dine there again tonight, because they can't get enough of a good thing. So this is kind of how it goes. So I'm going to come in and check it out with us.
Bonjour, monsieur. This evening we have best seat in the house for you. We have the Mast Lounge. Please come, take a seat.
Looking good so far. And Chef Dave, what's on the menu tonight?
Chicken cacciatore with couscous and roasted vegetables.
Yeah, it looks stunning. And presentation, as always, up to your usual standard.
It's a bit hard when you're just using much, you know?
So I can take a chair in the main suite.
Please.
There it is. Alrighty.
Very safe seat, that one. We're going to talk to the cockpit and it's in the lead there.
And here it comes.
Alright.
Here we go.
Chicken cacciatore.
Look at that.
This is chicken.
Chicken cacciatore.
Straight from the paddock to you.
See, life is good on the edge. Okay, day 35, journey to Osaka. Today we woke up to some not so good news. We saw when the sun came up this morning, doing a bit of rig check, that our D1 starboard stay had broken 3 or 4 strands. Now, let me show you a quick look here. Just seeing there, if you can or not, just a few little wires that are broken there. Now, D1 stay is quite important. If that fails up the load, we've got a very good chance of losing the mast. So, what we've done is we've just secured the mast with some temporary stays here, which we've rigged up. And they run up to our spreaders up the top there. I'm not sure if you can see that, but hopefully at least hold the mast if the wire does break. I guess what this means for us now, we've reduced sail, we can't carry much load at the stage, so we'll have to slow the boat down quite significantly, which will unfortunately impact on our arrival time and overall results, I guess. So I guess at the end of the day we need to make sure the boat's secure and the mast particularly stays up. We're still a long way out of Osaka, too far to be rescued if the mast does come down. Too far to get there on our own steam. Just with the fuel we have on board, we won't have enough to get that 600 or 700 miles in. So at this stage we just need to secure the boat as best as we can and take it from there. So yeah, a bit disappointing of course. We've also noticed the D2 stay above it. It also seems to be happening as well, so that's quite a concern. And the rig's only 12 months old, hasn't done a lot of work, so we just need to be get a bit mindful now of doing regular rig checks every day and making sure they're all hanging in there. So yeah, so that's a bit of a bummer, but we've at least got it secured at this stage, and hopefully that'll get us through. We'll touch base again soon. Also, when it happens, you've got a very long history of commercial shipping and obviously been at sea a long time in your life. Where's your thought process go when these sorts of things happen?
Right, twofold really. One inward, one outward. Inward is what do we do to unload that stay as soon as possible. So we triple reefed the main, we took all the headsail off, it was quite windy at the time, and then we backed the stay up. So initially with halyards, which are a very rough alignment, and then we climbed the mast, and I climbed the mast and helped haul me up.
and we ran another stay with a system on it so we could get tension in exactly the same line as that stay, and take the load off it, and also give us a backup if it goes. So that's the inward looking, you know, how can we protect that stay, you know. Outward looking is the what ifs. What if that departs? What if we then lose the rig? Is there a port of refuge? How much fuel do we have on board? How do we communicate with people? Do we have the tools to clear the mast? Which, you know, all of those questions need to be answered. Obviously, you know, you wouldn't set out a trip like this without the right gear to deal with it. So yes, I think as a master, as a captain of a vessel, you got to think, what have we lost? Not so much what have we lost, but what have we got left, and what are our options? But someone's got to be drilling down into that problem and seeing if they can stabilise it at least. Yeah.
It is, folks. We're finally here, the land of the rising sun, and here she comes. How cool is that? First time I've seen land for a long, long time. I've only seen land probably twice on this trip. We're finally in Masaka Bay. Lots of shipping around. But, yeah, it's pretty cool to see the sun come up, I'll tell you what. It's just amazing. It's very cool, actually. It's, water temperature's now down to what, Dave? 14 degrees. 2 or 3 days ago it was like 27, so we've come a long way. Well, tells the story, I guess, doesn't it? It is cold.
Actually, I'm in Key Sweeto. Our bay. The next bay is Masaka Bay.
Right, okay. Stand corrected.
Got to get through that narrow Eurocito yet.
That's a lot of shipping coming through today. I'm a bit blown away by it. Dave's kind of prepared me for it, tried to prepare for it, but yeah, you see the amount of ships out there, it's going to be pretty amazing to go through a very narrow channel with lots of them. That's very cool.
How good's my new beard?
Matches your grey beard.
Would you like the camera turned around?
Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Just we're about to bring down a light weather main, so this is a very, very light weather main which we use for light weather. Jeez, that's awesome, eh?
It's called Russell.
That's what we call a rustler. Russell the rustler. Big main back up. And Hoko Yacht Club, here we come. And a bit more breeze, please. Got a little welcoming committee. One man of an Aussie, flying the flag. He's come out to greet us, which is fantastic. I think he's trying to keep up us at the moment. We've just got a bit of breeze and we'll probably scoot off a bit, but really nice to see. Really nice to see. So we've got some flags flying, the breeze is in, and we're coming home. Happy faces today. Sun's out. Even the pillows are out drying out. That's pretty special. Peace and quiet for the ocean, 40 days, peace and quiet, just been fantastic. Really, really cool. Gonna miss this all day down here. Never mind, I guess I'll be back in civilization soon. yeah, we're just blown away not to be here now, and not far from seeing family and friends, and that's going to be very exciting, and looking forward to seeing them. Thanks for much.
Thank you, thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's good. And yeah, we'll
Oh, you want to know something? Put a stretch out.
air conditioning.
Yeah.
And there, warm in.
Lunch ball.
2 days ago, after almost 6 weeks, we couldn't wait to get off the edge. Now as we sail the last few miles down Osaka Bay, it is with a tinge of sadness we realise our journey is about to come to an end. Isn't it funny how the mind works? This has been an amazing adventure that's brought two good friends even closer together. As the fifth law of elasticity states, the mind once stretched by experience can never resume its original position.
We're done. Me crossing the line there. Just one of my favourite photos. And Melbourne to Osaka, it's a long way. I kid you not.
In the smallest boat that's ever done it.
Yeah, smallest boat's ever done it, that's true. There was a bit of a story to that one too. I misread the instructions, and it was hull length had to be more than 10 metres. When I read it, of course, in shipping you always talk about length overall. So the edge is 9.8 metres roughly on the hull length, but 11 metres overall. And so I called up George Shaw, the guy who he sort of runs the race basically, unofficially. He, funnily enough, overnight the rule changed. I think he just edited it in the document, but there you go. So yeah, the smallest boat ever did. Quick postscript. The worst typhoon to hit Japan in 20 years, centred on Osaka, just after I'd left. And this is Hokko Yacht Club, pretty battered up. Fortunately, the edge had moved down to Tanawa, which is closer to the bay mouth, and she suffered a few torn cleats out of the deck, but nothing too much. That's the boat that started with us, Bartholomew. Still in her pen and still afloat, thank goodness, but the access way to the berths been cut. Matrix reloaded, that was in May 19, so they haven't been near the boat. She's still got the damage, but they got banged up and the Japanese harbour master was up and put some gaffer tape on it. Bit of a shame actually. Cheap pogo, I reckon, guys, if I want them. And then postscript. Home. This year, or last year I should say. There you go.
Thank you.
Any questions? Sure, Phil, please.
And that is, why did you make the decision to sail through the cyclone instead of going to Southport?
Because we were more advanced, Phil, so basically that option wasn't really available, it wasn't really on the table. It was a cyclone, then it was a low, and then it became a cyclone again, so it was sort of that close point. The three of us sailed through it, so Morning Star, the SNS, ourselves and Bartholomew, all sailed through it. A couple of really big boats, like a leg row, which were miles ahead of the others, they went around the outside of it. She was like a 70-foot boat, she's a Warwick 67 actually, she's super fast. So, yeah, but that was the point.
Figure out what happened to the rig, because as you say, it didn't get much use.
No, so it had been replaced prior to the race. Possibly the boat sat for 6 months in Melbourne with the Angles fridge running, so that might have been something, you know, if it might have been some electrical stray current in there, but to be honest, to this day I'm not 100% sure.
So are you going to do it again?
I'll talk to you later about that one, Ollie. We've got a big boat.
Do you have any preparation for if you, in case you lost the mast, like a drill reading or something like this?
Yeah, we did. We had.
I don't mean just activate a pure.
Sorry?
I don't mean just activate a pure.
No, not a meter. No. Yeah, definitely. that was part of the planning. It obviously just depends. You can only really make that up on the run when you know what you've lost. We did have an old kite pole that might have been able to set something that just lashed to the deck. Plenty of string. We had tons of rope, so we could have done something, whatever we had left, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a certain plan before you sit down?
Yeah, I definitely had. I had the big one was I had a stay with a rope stay, so a Spectra with a system on it and a cleat, so that I could back up. That was very handy. Hello.
How did you manage the entrance into Osaka with all the shipping?
Well, that's my bread and butter. So yeah, we just sailed through. You know, it was pretty close, but we were actually running a full kite and about 15 knots of breeze, and I think we had the current against us. We're probably doing 9 or 10 knots on the log and about 1 knot across the ground. So yeah, you get that wrong pretty quick, I reckon.
You mentioned you installed an HF radio. Did you get much use out of that really?
We did for a while. You were required to use a HF. Well, Australian rules require you to have a HF for a race of that nature. A lot of the organising authorities put in exemptions, so you can get away with 2 sat phones. The morning sched was all done either by text message that you could do through your computer. I think there wasn't that many boats that had the HF. We used ours quite well until we used it in an electrical storm. We weren't being struck by lightning at the time, but it was definitely buzzy around us, and it just fried at that, and moisture and whatever else. Yeah, tough. HF is tough. Don't use it in the tropics. Hello, Jim.
Thanks very much. Really nice to see the videos. And I quite enjoyed the quote at the end about the experience never leaving you. So I'll ask you the hard question. Which is the most important part of that experience that you still think about?
Yeah, I think you asked me this before and I avoided it, didn't I? Thanks, and in public as well. Look, I think the personal growth that you get from taking on something like this, so bite off more than you can chew and chew like hell, comes to mind. Personal growth, you just can't give up, like you just got to keep going even when and that's even before you start the race, you just got to keep trying and keep pushing, and I think that's quite developmental. I love sailing, the finish and the welcome in Japan. I won't bore you with the video from there, but it's incredible. You get a glimpse of the idea with the champagne thing going on, but they welcome you with open arms. So that's a fantastic experience to get back to shore. But I think really it's the journey, the inward journey is the big one. Hello, that's right.
In terms of pushing yourself and getting you back to the critical point, and you mentioned fatigue management as well. Did you have points where you were questioning what's real, what can I do here, and am I solid thinking?
Oh, there's no doubt that there was times there where I couldn't say, would you like a wrap for lunch? I'd say, hey Paul, do you want a thingo? Because I couldn't actually find the words, seriously. So yeah, you're incredibly fatigued. Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
And how did you deal with that as a skipper?
Well, the watch system worked eventually. I mean, it was when you had rough weather and you didn't sleep off watch, it was tough. There was a few occasions when I couldn't wake Paul, so I just did the next shift as well, basically, if you like, because it just couldn't wake him up, You do have to you have to watch out for each other, for sure. We always had a rule that we went forward when the other person was on deck, so that was important, and there would be lock your ears shut. Seriously, lock your ears. There'd be more than once that I went to go out of the cockpit and Paul said, hey Dave, you just hooked onto the jib sheet and not the jack line. So, we were really strict on using the harnesses and the jack lines, but fatigue creeps in. So you do, I guess, you have to cover off on each other. Navigation can be tricky. I left the satellite link open one time, well 3 times I think, I know, and one time my Windows computer did an update, so I had a $1,500 Windows update, so that was pretty good fun. But that's how fatigue presents itself. Sorry.
I was just going to say though, the organisers, I think they've learned a lot over the races, and they did have a lot of introductory education for everyone involved, like the people in the race and the support people, and psychological education sessions from medical people, which was really, really important, I think, about how, and it included fatigue management, food fatigue, you know, about people actually not being able to eat because they have got the same boring food and what that does to your body. So I think they did that very well.
Yeah, that is a good point. The psychological lesson was about making sure you have the conversations before you get on board. Paul and I were very close friends, and we'd known each other for an awful long time, and we're quite compatible personality-wise, and I think that made an enormous difference. Some people get to the other end of this race and they step off, and I'm talking married couples, and they never speak again. So, and yet we're, you know, as you can see, we're still tight as. So, yeah. So maybe that's one way to get that separation if you've got a force issue. Mark.
So Dave, how did you balance racing versus getting there in one piece and sort of that? Because in a big boat you can push and push and push, but in a small boat with just two, you've got to balance getting there in one piece versus still racing.
Yeah, I guess.
Like going to cruise mode.
Yeah, but more than so. I guess you don't drop as low as cruise mode, but you're certainly not pushing it like you would be around the cans because you just don't have the energy. There's usually one person on deck. We reefed, you know, by ourselves, of course, day and night. You know, half a dozen times a watch easily, and I remember times. So talking about fatigue, I remember times there where I've sat there, and I just could not be bothered to shake out that second reef, you know, and I know that costs us time, of course, but it's funny. It's not like I wasn't doing anything. I was just mentally fragged, you know. So I guess that's how it presents. It's probably worse if it's the other way around. You don't normally forget to reef.
So on your next boat, would you put a furler? If I was going to have a furler, you'd have to have two. You couldn't do it with less than two. Like, there's no way you can have one sail that can cover all those conditions. That would just hurt you so much in the racing side. If you had a 4.5, two furlers, something maybe a 1.5 and a 3, just guessing here, or maybe a stay you could set inside that with storm jibs or number 4s would work. But anyway, that's obviously depends on the boat. Hello.
Autopilot.
Yeah, autopilot. Yeah. Thank goodness it survived. At one point I missed, when Marty and I sailed to Melbourne, we hand steered for 3 days when we lost our main electronics. And it was after about 3 days we worked out that the old original Ray Marine plotter could actually drive the autopilot. About to go down below and, you know, alter the course, but could actually steer the boats after 3 days. I said, oh, hey boys. So that was good, that was a backup, and again, redundancy. And then from that, sort of, George was our autopilot, and we also had Martha, and Martha was a piece of shot cord and balancing the sails, essentially.
What was, for you, most difficult item on your race? Something technical, or maybe forecasting, or maybe something between you and goalkeeper or preparation? What was difficult?
There's an awful lot of things that were difficult. I would suggest that the most difficult thing is making the decisions while you're preparing the boat, year ahead. Do I need a water maker? Do I need another sail? How am I going to run that? Do I go with roller furlers? Do I go with hang tetsels? You know, and I think that is probably where experience comes from.
Decision.
So?
Decision.
Decisions. Yeah, well, if I had to say one thing, yes.
Okay.
Did you say that you have signed up for the next one?
No, I did not.
Because you have.
There goes the calls again.
You did not say that, no, but you have. When someone asks.
Sharon, someone else is trying to.
Why not wing running and steering?
Yeah, good option. They work very well with longitudinal boats that are very stable, directionally stable. I think they work less well with sort of more modern shaped racing yachts, but you know, that's something we didn't have. Yeah. A lot of people took an extra autopilot with them. We didn't. If ours failed, we were going to hand steer. So that was one of those conscious decisions. a beer at the bar.
Yeah.
You always answer questions over there.
Thank you very much, Dave. Yeah, I'll be glad if we can talk some more over some drinks shortly because the bar is open. But thank you very much for that, Dave. It's fantastic, very inspirational, fascinating, I think. And I suppose one of the things I like about it is that it doesn't matter whether it's a race, which it was very much, of course, or if you're cruising, and I know you did a lot of that, bring the boat back. But if when something goes wrong, it doesn't matter if it's a racing boat or a cruising boat, something goes wrong. So to see how you address that and work through that, I think there's many things that are useful for everybody here. I think really, Dave. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Just in finishing, I would just mention what's coming up next in cruising. Of course, I feel hard for me to mention this really, to talk about a cruising jam this Sunday after everything you've talked about. But we have got a cruising jam this Sunday afternoon, and I do hope that everybody, as much as possible, can come out there. And Ollie says, please put your name down on the registration sheet so we know numbers. It helps us a lot. I hope to see a lot of you out there. Thank you. I'm going to mention the Great Gatsby Ball next because that's coming up really fast. Robbie, do you want to say anything about the Great Gatsby? You need to book tables. There is a couple of cruising tables going. You can phone up if you haven't already. You need to book. Book on the cruising table and we'll be all together there and have a lot of fun. Okay.
Hi, I've got brochures. We've got extra spots now, so that's why you've been being a bit inundated this week. And so we're going to be here, all the tables at the top, and this is all going to be a dancing area. So let me give you, who wants a brochure? If anyone hasn't got it, yeah, I think we've got about 170 people. We can take 220 in this room for sit-down dinners. So, yeah, we want as many people to come. It's going to be a great night. We've got a fabulous band and dancing shoes, and you don't have to go get the full gear if you want, just a little headband or, someone said that their grandfather or great-grandfather was in Fremantle prison 100 years ago, so they're coming in that garb, which, yeah, if that's what they want to do, that's fine with me. So, anyone want a brochure? No? I hope we see lots of you here.
That's great. Thanks, Robbie. And of course, excellent cause because celebrating 100 years of Fremantle Sailing Club, so, you won't get another chance for that one.
And the other thing is, Steve, it goes down in history. It'll actually be one of the main points, and I believe we'll be getting some publicity. So if you're here, you have your photo in history.
I don't know if we want photos. So the last thing is, Amanda's here. Amanda, could you mind coming forward and just tell us, because we have a connected subject of double-handed racing. Amanda, of course, organises, has done for some time, the Terry Fisher. So please, could you tell us what's coming with this season's Terry Fisher? Thanks, Amanda.
That was very sneaky. Hi, everyone. So this year is the 20th season of the Terry Fisher series, which originally was all double-handed sailing. 4 divisions dedicated to double-handed sailing. We've got 2 divisions now. And so to kick that season off, Todd and Dubbo are going to give us a cracking bar chat on Friday, October 8th. So mark that in your calendars and come along and have some rum. There'll probably also be a gin tasting through West Wind's Gin. And yeah, it should be a great night. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Amanda. Okay, the bar's open, so please come and join us for a drink and some more chat.